So, do you remember back that first reading? It seems so long ago now. But I encountered that poem, "What Shall We Do Then Until We Are Perfect?" years ago when I attended a UU clergy gathering before I was ordained. We were all invited to bring multiple copies of 3 readings to share, 3 readings that we wrote or we just love. It's kind of like a Christmas cookie exchange, you know. You go with some and you leave with lots. I love poetry, and I was psyched to read these new ones and be able to encounter new readings and poems. But as an insecure seminarian, I was worried that my offerings wouldn't be as good as those of the experienced clergy. Some of them were themselves poets. Those that they would bring would undoubtedly be better than mine. And I may have even considered not attending the gathering, so high my anxiety about looking bad. So how wonderful it was to hear, "What shall we do then until we are perfect?" It's a reminder that we will be waiting until the end of time for perfection. That reminder was an invitation to its readers, to me, to let go of perfectionism and focus on life's essentials, how the eternal is now. For congregations, those essentials include celebration of hope and care, and being good with each other. Over the years, I have made use of the poem many times in services, and I had it posted on my office bulletin board because, having grown up in a culture that implicitly, if not explicitly, values perfection, I need to be reminded over and over again. The shift in perception is like the goldfish being able to see outside the bowl of water it swims in. But over time, we swimming back in our bowl and we forget. So it's great to have those reminders. So as I prepare to serve this congregation for the coming church year, I need this reminder again, and I share it with you this morning, knowing that I'm not the only recovering perfectionist in this room and on your computer. It turns out that recognizing the destructive effects of perfectionism isn't new. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "We don't abandon our pursuits because we despair of ever perfecting them." In the Stoic view, since perfection is logically impossible, the wise person strives for progress instead. A contemporary Stoic blog, of course there is one, maybe more, makes the point that perfection is the enemy of, I know you're thinking good, but in this case, it's the enemy of action. I quote, "One of the key reasons behind progress being so beneficial is that it forces you to take action. To progress, you need to act. To progress, you need to move forward, even just a little. This act of taking control and moving the needle is infinitely better than doing nothing while striving for unattainable perfection." Remember, I almost didn't go to that clergy gathering. And I would add that this principle of taking control and moving the needle even a tiny bit, that principle applies to everything. Everything. from individual low-stakes poetry exchange to society-wide fighting oppression. Adrienne Marie Brown is not a Stoic, as far as I know, but she makes the same point in the context of social justice work. She said, "We could feel like failures all the time, but that's not going to save our lives. We have to be learning from everything that we're doing, how to keep improving and how to keep growing." Brown puts her finger on a big obstacle to letting go of perfection: the inevitability of failure, of not getting things right the first, second, third time, maybe never. When we shift our goal from perfection to progress, that means we will make mistakes. We make mistakes that other people, people whose approval we crave, can see. The phrase, "What will people think?" is probably much older than Epictetus, who lived in the second half of the 1st century. Everybody else is doing it better, may be a self-destructive corollary just as ancient. Australian Buddhist abbot and author Ajahn Brahm writes, "A healthy sense of self-worth comes from realizing the true meaning of being perfect." And he recounts this story as an illustration. A woman walked in a forest looking for a perfect tree. All she saw were crooked trees, trees with missing branches, and trees with damaged bark. Then she went into a government-managed plantation where she saw all the trees perfectly arranged in rows and lines, perfectly straight, with all the branches perfectly in place. She realized that the damaged trees in the natural forest were far more beautiful and calming than the perfect trees in the artificial plantation. And then she also understood that so-called damaged people are so much more beautiful than artificial people. She began to feel at home with herself, as much as she felt at home in the natural forest with all the gnarled and crooked trees. She understood the real meaning of perfection. She had been, for a long time, good enough. Only in the forest did she realize it. Well, that's the end of the story. But given what we understand from the Stoics and from Adrienne Marie Brown, we might wonder, what did the woman do now that she felt good enough, now that she had let go of perfection as ideal? Keep wondering. Mental health and parenting writer Emily P.G. Erickson says that her shift in perspective about perfection came after the killing of George Floyd, which happened in her St. Paul neighborhood. She wrote an essay about how she struggled as a white mother to tell her kids about race, justice, and what's right. She was worried that she might get the conversations wrong, but knew that it was important to do it anyway. Erickson received messages from people who felt the same way. Some said that they hadn't had a conversation with their kids because of their fear of doing it wrong. She writes, "Seeing my own worry reflected back to me helped me see it in a different way. This worry about being wrong and worry about doing wrong was just another way of talking about perfectionism. It dawned on me, perfectionism stops people from speaking out about race and justice. She found that her realization was not original. Remember the book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria, and Other Conversations About Race? It was published in 1997, way back then, by Beverly Daniel Tatum. Tatum warns, if we wait for perfection, we will never break the silence. The cycle of racism will continue uninterrupted. Erikson, the mother writing about parenting, Erikson went further with her analysis, arguing that perfectionism constrains all behavior, not just that which disrupts racism. Perfectionism stops us from showing all of our humanness. Instead, perfectionism demands that we show only the flawless versions of ourselves. Sounds kind of artificial, doesn't it? The parts that don't conform to the dominant culture's norms are kept hidden. The problem is, she concludes, at least in the United States, the dominant culture is infused with white supremacy. In fact, perfectionism is identified as one of the 13 characteristics of white supremacy culture in the 2001 groundbreaking book, Dismantling Racism, a workbook for social change groups. You just realized that's a quarter-century old. We'll talk later about how much progress has been made. Among the signs of perfectionism that reinforces white supremacy are these. Making a mistake is confused with being a mistake, doing wrong with being wrong. Little time, energy, or money is put into reflection or identifying lessons learned that can improve practice. In other words, little or no learning from mistakes, which, by the way, is exactly the opposite of Stoic philosophy. And a tendency to identify what is wrong, little ability to identify, name, and appreciate what is right. Now I'm going to read these three again, and as I do that, I invite you all to recall when you've experienced any of them at work, at school, or in any organization that you've been a part of. Making a mistake is confused with being a mistake. Doing wrong is confused with being wrong. Little time, energy, or money is put into reflection or identifying lessons learned that can improve practice. In other words, little or no learning from mistakes. A tendency to identify what is wrong. Little ability to identify, name, and appreciate what is right. I think if you have recalled one or two incidences of any of those points, our experience confirms that perfectionism, along with the other characteristics of white supremacy culture, are damaging to both people of color and to white people. It's everyone. So what can we Unitarian Universalists do as individuals and as a congregation to let go of the perfectionism that we swim in every day? For individuals, Erikson advises a thought experiment. When you notice perfectionism, You can borrow a technique from mindfulness practices and cognitive behavior therapy and name it. But instead of saying, that's perfectionism, you can say, that's white supremacy culture. Perfectionism, by that name, doesn't have the same allure, does it? When you name perfectionism for what it is, when you put your finger on it like this, like a bubble, pop, it disappears. Now, as I mentioned earlier and was recognized earlier, I will serve this congregation as halftime co-minister with Reverend Ann for a year beginning in just a few weeks, August 1st. So it might seem a bit odd to lead with a message valuing imperfection. But I think it's good to remind myself, ourselves, that how we do things together, the quality of relationship, is as or more important than how much we do. I know that I'm coming in towards the end of your transition from interim to settled ministry, and I have a lot to learn. I am guaranteed to make some missteps. Heck, this sermon may well be an example. If there are any gaps between intention and impact in my message, over the next year, please tell me when I've made a mistake, and we can figure out together how we can make progress despite or because of it. I look forward to learning how this congregation is practicing some of the antidotes to perfectionism named in Dismantling Racism. The first one, develop a culture of appreciation where the organization takes time to make sure that people's work and efforts are appreciated, is right in the middle of Albany UU's covenant. We celebrate the diversity of our identities and experiences and foster a culture of appreciation, inspiration, and kindness. It's heartening to read that on your website, and it has been even better to experience that culture when I interacted with staff and congregation members for Rudy Johnson's Celebration of Life in April and guest preaching last month. I am eager to learn about this congregation as a learning organization where it's expected that everyone will make mistakes, not just me. And those mistakes offer opportunities for learning, an environment where people can recognize that mistakes can lead to positive results, where we can separate the person from the mistake. And of course, that last antidote to perfectionism brings it back to the individual self-regard. When we make a mistake, maybe, just maybe, you can bring to mind a mistake that you have made, perhaps long ago. Perhaps you have to dig back in your memory. But when you made that mistake, did it make you question your self-worth? If so, I invite us all to take a more than 2,000-year-old tip and see the mistake in the context of progress. Unlearning is just as hard, maybe even harder than learning, especially as we get older, which most of us do. In letting go of perfectionism, may we see ourselves like the woman in the forest as good enough, where good enough is better than perfect because we can answer the invitation to act without fear of failure. Friends, what shall we do then until we are perfect? nothing more nor less than live. May it be so. Amen.